They say the truth has a funny way of surfacing, but I never imagined it would surface through grainy security cameras at a salt mining plant. After 5 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife Anda better than anyone. We met at work, dated for a year, and built what I believed was a solid foundation. In our small town, gossip travels faster than a salt truck on delivery day. But somehow I missed the biggest story of all. When my former security colleague, John, called me for drinks, I had no idea I was about to discover the most awkward truth of my life through workplace surveillance cameras. But to understand how we got there, you need to know about our peculiar little town and the industrial romance that started it all. Welcome to Salt Mine Central Population. Everyone knows everyone. Our entire town revolves around one massive salt mining operation that employs practically everyone within a 50-mile radius. The plant sits at the center of our community, like some industrial heartbeat, pumping out paychecks and gossip in equal measure. When you work at the same place as half the town, including your spouse, you quickly learn that privacy becomes a luxury you can't afford. The break room conversations flow seamlessly from production quotas to who's dating whom. And somehow everyone knew about the mayor's wife's alleged affair with the hardware store owner before the mayor did. Information travels through our plant's informal network faster than official announcements from management. Working alongside your spouse creates this bizarre dynamic where your professional life and personal life merge into one continuous stream of togetherness. You see each other during shift changes, lunch breaks, and mandatory safety meetings, then go home and pretend to have separate lives. The funny thing about small-town industrial romance is that everyone becomes invested in your relationship status, whether you want them to or not. Your coworkers notice when you and your spouse arrive separately, when you eat lunch at different tables, or when one of you looks upset during the morning briefing. The shift supervisors know which couples are going through rough patches before the couples themselves realize it, simply because workplace behavior tells the whole story. When Anna and I both worked there, our colleagues could read our relationship status better than we could, picking up on subtle changes in our interactions that we completely missed. What makes this situation particularly amusing is how the same security infrastructure designed to protect company property would eventually become the star witness in my personal drama. The plant had installed surveillance cameras throughout the facility to prevent theft, and the packaging department where Anna worked received additional cameras after several incidents involving missing inventory. These cameras capture everything from minor workplace accidents to major equipment failures, creating a comprehensive record of daily operations. Nobody thinks twice about the cameras after a while because they become part of the industrial landscape, as familiar as the safety signs and emergency exits. The irony of my situation starts with my background in security, which should have made me more aware of surveillance blind spots and suspicious behavior patterns. Yet when it came to my own marriage, I apparently developed a complete blind spot that would have embarrassed my former supervisors. The surveillance technology that protected company assets would soon reveal that some thefts involve more than just missing inventory. Sometimes the most advanced security measures protect you from threats you never saw coming, especially when those threats emerge from the most trusted sources. But to understand how I ended up in this position, you need to know about my journey from night shift security guard to the kind of success that apparently made me too busy to notice what was happening right under my nose. From security guard to husband, the career climb nobody warned me about. Starting my career as a night security guard seemed like the perfect temporary solution to pay for technical college. I requested night shifts specifically because they pay better and left my days free for classes. My partner and I would walk the plant perimeter with flashlights and radios, checking doors and watching for anything unusual. The work felt important and gave me real independence from my parents for the first time. I earned decent money while learning skills that would serve me well in future positions. The night shifts taught me to observe people and situations with careful attention to detail. We documented everything from minor equipment issues to unusual employee behavior in our reports. The training emphasized watching for patterns that might indicate theft, safety violations, or unauthorized access. I became skilled at reading body language, noticing when someone acted nervous or defensive, and identifying situations that required closer investigation. These observation skills made me feel like an expert at detecting deception and suspicious activity, Though I would later discover that professional vigilance means nothing when you're emotionally invested in trusting someone. After graduation, I transitioned smoothly from security to maintenance technician, then eventually earned promotion to department supervisor. Each advancement brought increased responsibility and better pay, making me feel like I was building a solid foundation for adult life. The career progression happened exactly as I had planned during those long night shifts when I dreamed about my future. The maintenance technician role introduced me to the plant's complex mechanical systems and gave me hands-on experience with industrial equipment. I learned to troubleshoot problems, perform preventive maintenance, and coordinate repairs with minimal downtime. Becoming a department supervisor meant managing both equipment and people, which presented new challenges I hadn't anticipated. I coordinated maintenance schedules, supervised repair crews, and reported directly to plant management about operational issues. The position required me to balance technical expertise with leadership skills, often making decisions that affected both productivity and safety. My salary increased significantly, providing the financial stability I needed to consider starting a family. My former security colleagues remained part of my professional network even after I moved to maintenance. We would share information about plant operations, discuss safety concerns, and maintain the informal communication system that connected different departments. These relationships proved valuable for coordinating work between security and maintenance teams, especially when equipment issues affected facility safety. I never imagined these connections would eventually provide the most devastating information of my personal life. The career advancement that made me feel so accomplished also created conditions for marital problems I didn't recognize. Increased responsibilities meant longer hours, more stress, and less time for personal relationships. I focused on proving myself worthy of each promotion, working late to ensure projects finished on schedule. The dedication that impressed my supervisors apparently frustrated my wife, but I interpreted her complaints as temporary adjustment issues rather than serious relationship problems. 5 years into our marriage, my promotion to chief mechanic represented the peak of my career ambitions and the beginning of my marriage's decline. The position required me to oversee all mechanical systems throughout the plant, coordinate major repairs, and manage a team of skilled technicians. I stayed late most evenings to complete paperwork, plan maintenance schedules, and ensure equipment operated efficiently. The increased income should have improved our quality of life, but instead created distance between Anna and me that I failed to recognize. John remained in the security department throughout my career changes, eventually becoming senior security officer with access to all surveillance systems. He knew about my background in security and understood how the camera systems operated. Our friendship continued through casual conversations during shift changes and occasional after-work social events. I valued his perspective on plant operations and trusted his judgment about security matters, never suspecting he would become the messenger of my personal catastrophe. The surveillance cameras I helped install during my security days evolved into a comprehensive monitoring system that documented everything happening throughout the facility. New cameras appeared regularly as management expanded coverage to address theft concerns and safety compliance requirements. The packaging department received additional cameras after several incidents involving missing inventory and unauthorized access during off hours. These security upgrades happened gradually, with each new camera becoming part of the familiar workplace landscape. My expertise in surveillance technology should have made me more aware of how thoroughly the cameras documented routine workplace activities. I knew exactly where cameras were positioned, what angles they covered, and how long recordings were stored. Yet I never considered that this same technology might capture activities involving people I trusted most. The professional knowledge that should have protected me from surprises instead provided the perfect tool for discovering the most shocking surprise of my life. The combination of my security background, career advancement, and former colleague relationships created the perfect storm for uncovering truth in the most ironic way possible. My past experience would return to haunt me through the very surveillance systems I once operated, delivered by someone who shared my professional history. But before we get to that devastating phone call from John, you need to understand how this whole mess started in the most unlikely place for romance. The packaging department meet romance in the industrial age. Anna worked the same shift as me in the packaging department, where romance meant trying to make a good first impression while wearing mandatory safety goggles and listening to the constant hum of conveyor belts. She had recently graduated from college and started at the plant around the same time I transitioned from security to maintenance. We crossed paths during equipment checks and shift changes, exchanging basic pleasantries about work schedules and equipment reliability, the kind of conversation that happens 100 times daily in any workplace. I introduced myself during a routine maintenance check on one of the packaging machines. Anna was adjusting settings on a quality control station when I approached to inspect nearby equipment. She wore the standard issue safety uniform that somehow looked better on her than anyone else in the department. Her hair was pulled back in the required safety style, and she had mastered the art of looking professional while surrounded by industrial chaos. We talked about work schedules and equipment problems, nothing particularly memorable at the time. The breakthrough came when I offered her a ride home after our shift ended. She mentioned that her car was having problems and she had been catching rides with various coworkers. I volunteered to give her a lift, thinking it was just a neighborly gesture between colleagues. The drive to her house took about 15 minutes, during which we discovered we had similar backgrounds and shared interests beyond our jobs at the plant. She lived with her mother in a small house across town, while I had recently moved into my own apartment after saving enough money for my security job. These rides home became a regular arrangement over the following weeks. Anna would wait for me in the employee parking lot after our shifts ended, and we would continue conversations that started during brief workplace encounters. The car rides provided the only private time we had together, away from the constant noise and supervision of the plant environment. We talked about our college experiences, career goals, and life outside the salt mining operation. The conversations grew more personal as we became comfortable with each other, developing the kind of mutual affection that workplace relationships often produce. The 15-minute drives became the foundation of our entire relationship. Away from the industrial chaos and constant supervision, we could actually hear each other speak without shouting over machinery. Anna revealed personality traits during these car rides that seemed charming at the time. She was particular about her appearance, always looking polished despite the industrial work environment. She complained occasionally about the job's physical demands and the way the work environment affected her hair and clothing. She mentioned feeling overlooked by supervisors and frustrated with the limited advancement opportunities in the packaging department. I found reasons to check equipment near Anna's workstation more frequently than necessary, timing my rounds to coincide with her breaks and lunch periods. The department supervisor tolerated these interactions as long as they didn't interfere with productivity or safety protocols. Other workers in the department noticed our growing friendship and made the usual workplace comments about office romance, but management generally ignored personal relationships unless they created problems. Anna displayed behaviors during our dating period that seemed like healthy self-confidence. She was always conscious of her appearance and made efforts to look attractive despite the challenging work environment. She seemed to thrive on attention and compliments from coworkers, which I interpreted as normal social behavior. She occasionally mentioned feeling unappreciated or ignored by supervisors, expressing frustration when her efforts went unnoticed. These personality traits seemed reasonable for someone working in a demanding industrial environment. The decision to move in together happened after 6 months of dating, followed by marriage 6 months later. This timeline felt natural, given our daily contact at work and the intensity of workplace relationships. We saw each other during shifts, ate lunch together, and spent evenings discussing our shared experiences at the plant. The constant togetherness accelerated our relationship in ways that might not have happened if we worked in different locations. We thought we knew each other completely because we spent so much time together, but workplace behavior doesn't always reflect home personality. 6 months felt like enough time to make life-changing decisions when you see someone every day at work. The intensity of workplace relationships creates a false sense of knowing someone completely. The packaging department contained numerous storage rooms and equipment spaces that provided privacy from the main production floor, areas I had maintained during my security days. I never imagined that one of those storage rooms I've once helped secure would later become the scene of betrayal. The irony of offering rides home would eventually come full circle when I discovered Anna was getting rides from someone else. The same gesture that started our relationship became symbolic of its end. The workplace romance that seemed so natural and convenient would prove to have built-in vulnerabilities that neither of us anticipated. The industrial setting that brought us together would ultimately provide the evidence that tore us apart. What I didn't realize was that getting married to someone you work with means you never actually escape each other. And sometimes that constant proximity reveals things you never wanted to discover. Marriage life, when reality meets your Pinterest board expectations. Our marriage started with Pinterest. Perfect expectations about spending every day together, but the reality felt more like being trapped in a romantic comedy where nobody gets the joke. We worked the same shift, ate lunch at the same time, and drove home together in the same car. Most couples get to miss each other during the day and have stories to share when they reunite at home, but we experienced everything together in real time. Our conversations at dinner consisted mainly of rehashing events we had both witnessed firsthand, which made for some pretty repetitive evenings. The weirdest part about workplace marriage was discovering how different Anna acted at the plant versus at home. At work, she maintained perfect professional composure, followed all safety protocols, and interacted politely with supervisors and coworkers. At home, however, she became much more critical and demanding, pointing out problems with our apartment, our finances, and our relationship that she never mentioned during work hours. The most telling change was her sudden bathroom ritual before work shifts. She started spending 20 minutes applying makeup and fixing her hair for a job that required safety goggles and hard hats. When I asked about the extra effort, she claimed the industrial environment made her feel unattractive and she needed to compensate. I noticed early warning signs that seemed completely normal at the time, but would later make devastating sense. Anna mentioned feeling overlooked by supervisors and complained that her efforts went unnoticed by management. She seemed particularly interested in gossip about other employees and asked detailed questions about my interactions with various coworkers. I dismissed these behaviors as normal working stress rather than signs of deeper dissatisfaction. The packaging department was known for its demanding supervisors and high-pressure environments, so her complaints seemed reasonable. Keeping work drama separate from marriage drama became impossible when both happened in the same building. If Anna had a difficult day with her supervisor, she would bring that frustration home and it would affect our entire evening. When we disagreed about household responsibilities, the tension would carry over into our workplace interactions the next day. Our coworkers could read our relationship status based on how we interacted during shift changes and lunch breaks. The packaging department became a stage where our personal problems played out in front of an audience of curious colleagues. The comedic irony of believing I knew Anna completely just because we spent every waking hour together became obvious only in hindsight. Constant proximity created an illusion of intimacy that masked the actual distance growing between us. I assumed that seeing her daily work performance meant I understood her personality completely. I thought our shared workplace experiences created a bond that other couples couldn't match. The reality was spending every moment together prevented us from having the kind of separate experiences that give couples interesting things to discuss and share. Workplace marriages operate without instruction manuals, and neither Anna nor I understood the unique challenges we faced. We entered marriage with romantic notions about spending every day together and building a life around our shared employment. Nobody warned us about the claustrophobic effect of constant togetherness or the difficulty of maintaining individual identities when your entire social circle comes from the same workplace. We learned through trial and error that some couples need space to maintain attraction and interest in each other. The contrast between our public behavior at work and our private struggles at home became increasingly obvious to anyone paying attention. We maintained professional courtesy during work hours, coordinating our tasks and interacting politely in front of colleagues. Behind closed doors, however, we were dealing with growing dissatisfaction and communication problems that we never discussed openly. I thought we were successfully keeping our personal issues private, but the strain probably showed in ways I didn't recognize at the time. Anna's complaints about attention and affection were actually requests for a different kind of attention entirely. She mentioned that I didn't notice her efforts to look good for me, and that I didn't show enough affection or appreciation. I interpreted these comments as normal relationship maintenance issues that could be resolved through better time management and more conscious effort. I failed to understand that her complaints represented deeper emotional needs that weren't being met through our current relationship pattern. She was basically interviewing for someone else to fill the position I was neglecting. The reality of Anna's growing dissatisfaction became clear through her changing behavior patterns. She stopped arguing with my explanations about work responsibilities and time management issues. Instead of continuing our discussions about relationship problems, she would simply nod and agree with whatever I said. This apparent acceptance felt like progress to me, but it actually meant she had stopped investing emotional energy in trying to fix our problems. Her silence represented disengagement rather than understanding. 5 years of marriage can feel like a lifetime or a blink of an eye, depending on what you discover at the end. During those years, I thought we were building a solid foundation for our future together. We had established routines, shared financial responsibilities, and created what seemed like a stable partnership. However, the discovery of Anna's affair recontextualized those 5 years as a period of gradual deception and emotional distance that I had completely misunderstood. Anna's transformation from complaining wife to silent observer should have alarmed me, but I interpreted it as relationship maturity. Her lack of arguments seemed like acceptance of my career priorities and understanding of our financial goals. The truth was that she had simply found alternative sources for the attention and affection she wasn't getting at home. What I didn't realize was that my next career advancement would create the perfect conditions for her to explore those alternatives more thoroughly. The promotion that changed everything. More money, more problems. Getting promoted to chief mechanic at the salt mining facility sounded impressive when I accepted the position, but nobody mentioned that the title came with a marriage to industrial equipment that demanded more attention than my actual wife. The promotion meant overseeing all mechanical systems throughout the plant and managing a team of skilled technicians. I was essentially fixing pumps at midnight while my relationship leaked by daylight, though I remained completely oblivious to this ironic parallel. My days stretched longer as I stayed late to complete maintenance reports, plan equipment schedules, and ensure every machine operated at peak efficiency. The increased income should have improved our quality of life, but instead created a gap between Anna and me that I completely failed to notice. I justified every late evening at the plant by telling myself I was building our financial future and securing stability for the children we planned to have someday. Each extra hour spent troubleshooting equipment problems represented another step toward the comfortable life I envisioned for us. The irony of working harder to provide for my family while accidentally neglecting the family I was providing for became painfully obvious only after everything fell apart. I measured success by the size of my paycheck and the respect I earned from supervisors, completely missing the fact that Anna measured success by entirely different criteria. My increased responsibilities created the perfect opportunity for Anna to seek attention elsewhere, though I remained completely oblivious to her growing dissatisfaction. While I focused on proving myself worthy of the promotion and managing complex industrial systems, Anna dealt with the reality of having a husband who was physically present but mentally preoccupied with work demands. She continued working her regular packaging department schedule while I disappeared into the maintenance office for hours each day, reviewing equipment manuals and coordinating repair schedules. The promotion that made me feel successful actually created distance between us that I interpreted as temporary adjustment rather than permanent relationship damage. Anna's complaints about my lack of attention started subtly but became more frequent as my work responsibilities expanded. She mentioned that I didn't notice her efforts to look good for me, and that I didn't pay enough attention or show affection throughout our daily interactions. She pointed out that we barely talked anymore except about work-related topics, and that I seemed more interested in equipment problems than relationship problems. These complaints seemed reasonable given my increased workload, but I treated them as temporary issues that would resolve themselves once I adapted to the new position. My response to Anna's concerns followed the same logical problem-solving approach I used for mechanical issues at the plant. I explained that I worked hard for the sake of our family and future children, assuring her that I would find more time for her soon once I mastered the demands of the new position. I outlined my career advancement goals and described how the increased income would benefit our long-term financial stability. These explanations made perfect sense to me, but they completely failed to address Anna's emotional needs or acknowledge the impact of my changed behavior on our relationship. The comedic timing of career success and marriage failure happening simultaneously became obvious only after I discovered the truth about Anna's activities. While I celebrated professional achievements and earned recognition from plant management, my marriage deteriorated through neglect and misplaced priorities. The promotion that represented the peak of my career ambitions coincided with the beginning of my personal life's collapse. I was so focused on mechanical systems that I failed to notice the breakdown of the most important system in my life. Anna's efforts to look good weren't necessarily for my benefit, though this possibility never occurred to me during our conversations about attention and affection. She spent increasing amounts of time on her appearance before work, choosing outfits carefully and paying extra attention to her hair and makeup. She mentioned feeling overlooked by supervisors and complained about not receiving recognition for her efforts at work. I interpreted these concerns as normal workplace frustrations rather than signs that she was seeking validation and appreciation from sources outside our marriage. The contrast between my logical explanations and Anna's emotional needs created a communication gap that widened with each attempted conversation. I approached relationship problems with the same systematic thinking that worked well for equipment troubleshooting, assuming that rational solutions would resolve any emotional issues. Anna needed attention, affection, and quality time together, while I offered explanations about career advancement and financial planning. We spoke different languages without realizing it, each becoming increasingly frustrated with the other's apparent inability to understand obvious concerns. Staying late at work would ironically lead to discovering what Anna was doing during those late hours, though I had no idea this revelation was coming. While I spent evenings in the maintenance office completing paperwork and planning repair schedules, Anna had apparently found alternative ways to spend her time. The extra hours I devoted to equipment maintenance created opportunities for her to engage in activities that had nothing to do with industrial machinery. The promotion I thought would solve our problems actually created entirely new ones that I didn't recognize until too late. Increased income meant nothing if it came at the cost of our emotional connection and daily interaction quality. Anna's transformation from complaining wife to silent observer should have alarmed me, but I interpreted her lack of argument as acceptance of my career priorities. When she stopped discussing relationship problems and simply agreed with my explanations about work demands, I thought we had reached an understanding. What I didn't realize was that her silence, Anna's complaints, the warning signs, I completely missed. Looking back now, I realize that Anna's complaints about lack of attention were essentially job applications for someone else to fill the position I was neglecting. She was posting a vacancy notice for the role of appreciative partner, complete with a detailed job description of everything I wasn't providing. Her complaints weren't requests for improvement, but rather interviews to see if I was qualified to keep the position. The funny thing about male logic is how we assume that explaining our reasoning automatically solves emotional problems. When Anna expressed frustration about my work schedule and lack of attention, I would launch into detailed explanations about career advancement and providing for our future family. These logical presentations made perfect sense to me, but they completely failed to address her emotional needs. Anna's silence after these conversations wasn't understanding, but planning, though I completely misinterpreted her response. When she stopped arguing with my explanations about work demands, I thought we had reached a mutual understanding. Her lack of counter-arguments seemed like acceptance of my career priorities. The reality was that she had simply stopped wasting energy on conversations that weren't producing the results she wanted. My confidence that Anna understood my intentions was completely misplaced while she was clearly making other arrangements. I believed that my explanations about working hard for our family's sake had convinced her to be patient with my demanding schedule. Meanwhile, Anna had apparently decided that waiting for me to find more time wasn't worth the effort. She had moved on to finding someone who already had time available and was willing to provide the attention she wasn't getting at home. What Anna was really doing during all those hours when I was working late becomes a fascinating question in hindsight. While I spent evenings in the maintenance office completing paperwork and coordinating repair schedules, she had apparently found more interesting ways to occupy her time. I assumed she was at home watching television, reading, or handling household tasks that we usually shared. The thought that she might be engaged in activities requiring coordination with other people never occurred to me. Her schedule seemed to align perfectly with my extended work hours, which I interpreted as supportive understanding rather than convenient timing for unauthorized activities. The comedic irony of Anna's efforts to look good being noticed by someone other than her husband became obvious only after I discovered the truth. She had complained that I didn't notice her increased attention to appearance, her careful selection of work outfits, and her extra time spent on hair and makeup. I dismissed these concerns as normal relationship issues that would resolve themselves once I adapted to my new responsibilities. Anna's efforts were indeed being noticed and appreciated, just not by the person she was supposedly trying to impress. Her complaints about my lack of attention were actually announcements that someone else was providing the validation she wasn't getting at home. Anna's lack of arguments wasn't peaceful acceptance, but strategic disengagement from our relationship conflicts. When she stopped discussing problems and simply agreed with my explanations about work priorities, I interpreted this as relationship maturity. Her silence seemed like evidence that she had accepted my career demands and understood the temporary nature of our scheduling conflicts. The truth was that she had decided our conversations were pointless because she had found alternative solutions to her problems. Her agreement with my reasoning wasn't understanding, but indifference to my explanations. Sometimes when people stop fighting, it's not because they found peace, but because they found alternatives to the relationship they were fighting about. Anna's transformation from complaining wife to silent observer should have alarmed me, but I welcomed the apparent reduction in conflict. Her lack of arguments seemed like progress toward a more harmonious marriage, where both partners understood their roles and responsibilities. The reality was that she had simply found someone else to provide what she wasn't getting from me. Her silence represented emotional departure rather than emotional acceptance. Anna's increased beauty salon visits were possibly preparation for someone else's appreciation, though this possibility never occurred to me during our discussions about attention and affection. She mentioned spending money on hair appointments and nail services that I barely noticed, but her investment in looking good was indeed paying dividends in ways I never expected. My promise to find more time for Anna came about 5 years too late to save our marriage. By the time I assured her that I would balance work and personal responsibilities better, she had already found someone who made time for her a priority. My career advancement had created a gap between us that I thought was temporary, but which Anna had decided was permanent. The increased income and professional recognition I worked so hard to achieve meant nothing when measured against the relationship stability I had accidentally sacrificed. My efforts to provide for our future had inadvertently destroyed the partnership I was trying to strengthen. The warning signs I completely missed were actually a comprehensive evaluation of a relationship that Anna conducted over several months. Her complaints about attention and affection were performance reviews that I repeatedly failed. Her silence after my explanations was the equivalent of giving up on an employee who couldn't meet basic job requirements. Her increased attention to appearance was preparation for interviews with potential replacement candidates. By the time I recognized these patterns, Anna had already made her decision about our marriage and implemented her alternative plan. What I didn't know was that someone else had been watching Anna's activities with professional interest, and that person was about to make the most awkward phone call of both our lives. John's phone call, when your security buddy becomes your worst nightmare? John's phone call started as the most ordinary invitation imaginable, just a former colleague suggesting we grab a drink and catch up on old times. He mentioned wanting to discuss some things and asked if I had time to meet at our usual spot after work. I agreed immediately because John and I maintained a good friendship even after I left security for the maintenance department. These casual meetups happened every few months, usually involving complaints about plant management, updates on mutual friends, and general workplace gossip that kept us connected to our shared professional history. What I should have noticed was the unusual tension in John's voice during our brief phone conversation. He spoke more quietly than usual and seemed to choose his words carefully, which struck me as odd given our normally casual communication style. He repeated the meeting suggestion twice and emphasized that he had something important to discuss. I interpreted his serious tone as work-related concerns, perhaps problems with new security protocols or issues with plant management that he wanted to discuss privately. The possibility that this conversation would involve Anna never occurred to me. When we met at the bar, John seemed uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. He ordered his drink and sat quietly for several minutes, staring at his hands and avoiding direct eye contact. The awkwardness was palpable, but I assumed he was dealing with some personal problem or workplace stress that he needed time to articulate. John had always been straightforward in our conversations, so his hesitation seemed completely out of character. I waited patiently for him to start talking, making casual conversation about work and mutual friends while he gathered his thoughts. The tension in John's voice when he finally started speaking should have prepared me for what was coming, but I remained completely clueless about the direction of our conversation. He began by mentioning the security cameras in the packaging department, which seemed like a normal topic given our shared background in plant security. He referenced the recent installation of additional cameras due to theft concerns, which I remembered from my maintenance work coordinating the electrical connections for the new equipment. The conversation felt routine until John hesitated again and mentioned Anna's name in connection with the surveillance footage. My initial confusion about why John would be discussing Anna and security footage in the same sentence created a moment of complete bewilderment. I couldn't understand how my wife would be connected to security concerns or surveillance issues at the plant. Anna worked in the packaging department where the cameras were installed, but she was a reliable employee with no history of problems or suspicious behavior. My mind struggled to process the connection between Anna and anything that would require discussion of surveillance footage. The logical possibilities that occurred to me involved minor workplace incidents or safety violations that might have been captured on camera. The moment when I realized this conversation wasn't about theft of company property created a shift in my understanding that I can barely describe. John's careful phrasing and obvious discomfort suddenly made sense as he struggled to deliver information that he knew would devastate me. The security cameras installed to catch petty thieves had indeed caught something much more valuable being stolen, but it wasn't company property. A surveillance system designed to protect plant assets had documented the theft of something far more personal and irreplaceable. My mind immediately jumped to defending Anna's financial situation, which reveals how completely I misunderstood the situation. I interrupted John before he could finish a sentence, explaining that Anna couldn't be involved in theft because her salary barely covered clothes and beauty salon expenses. I pointed out that I handled all major financial responsibilities and that Anna had no need to steal anything from the plant. This defensive reaction showed how naive I was about the real nature of what John was trying to tell me. I was so focused on protecting Anna's reputation that I couldn't grasp the actual problem he was describing. John's professional obligation to keep surveillance information confidential conflicted with his loyalty to me as a friend and former colleague, and he risked his job by sharing what he had witnessed. The surveillance footage belonged to the company and was meant to document security incidents, not personal relationships between employees. His decision to tell me about Anna's activities represented a violation of his professional responsibilities, but his personal loyalty ultimately outweighed his professional obligations. The security cameras installed to address theft issues had indeed caught something much more valuable being stolen. The surveillance system designed to protect company property had documented the theft of my marriage, my trust, and my understanding of the person I thought I knew completely. The cameras meant to catch unauthorized personnel had captured unauthorized activities involving very authorized personnel. The security measures protecting company assets had revealed that my most important personal asset was being stolen on company time. John's revelation that Anna was cheating completely shattered my understanding of my marriage and my wife. The security footage he described showed Anna engaged in activities that had nothing to do with her packaging department responsibilities. The evidence was irrefutable because cameras don't lie, don't embellish, and don't misinterpret what they record. John's reluctance to share this information became completely understandable as I processed the implications of what he was telling me. The comedic irony of my security background making me the last to know about my wife's affair reached its peak during this conversation. My expertise in surveillance technology and my knowledge of plant security systems have been completely useless in protecting me from the most significant security breach of my personal life. The professional skills that made me successful at work had failed me completely in recognizing the threat closest to home. After John finished explaining what he had witnessed, he offered to show me the footage if I wanted to see it for myself. The thought of watching my marriage end through grainy surveillance footage seemed surreal, but I knew I needed to see the evidence with my own eyes. Sometimes the most advanced security system can't protect you from the person you trust most, and sometimes the only way to accept the truth is to watch it unfold on a monitor screen. The security footage revelation technology never lies. John led me to the security office where the surveillance monitors displayed multiple camera feeds from throughout the plant. The room felt smaller than I remembered from my security days, filled with equipment that had been upgraded since I worked there. He pulled up the footage from the packaging department storage room, fast-forwarding through hours of empty corridors until he found the timestamp he was looking for. The grainy black and white image showed the familiar layout of the storage area where Anna was supposed to be organizing inventory during her shifts. The footage showed Anna entering the storage room during what should have been her regular work hours. She moved through the space with complete confidence, as if she had been there many times before. There was no hesitation, no looking around to check if anyone was watching, no nervousness about being in an unauthorized location. She walked directly to a specific area of the room and began removing her work uniform with casual efficiency. The camera angle provided a clear view of her actions as she prepared for activities that had nothing to do with packaging department responsibilities. What I witnessed next was my wife engaging in intimate activities with a man I recognized as another plant employee from a different department. The quality of the recording was clear enough to eliminate any possibility of mistaken identity. Anna's face was clearly visible, and her actions were unmistakably deliberate and practiced. This was the woman I had breakfast with that morning, the person I thought I knew completely after 5 years of marriage. The most devastating aspect of watching the footage was seeing Anna's complete comfort and familiarity with the situation. She knew exactly where to position herself relative to the camera angles, suggesting she understood the surveillance system's limitations. Her movements were efficient and practiced, indicating this was not a first-time occurrence, but rather a well-established routine. The casual nature of her behavior on camera contrasted sharply with the careful attention she paid to her appearance and schedule at home. After the intimate encounter ended, Anna spent several minutes adjusting her appearance before leaving the storage room. She fixed her hair, straightened her clothing, and checked her reflection in a small mirror she had apparently brought for this purpose. The careful attention she paid to looking presentable after these unauthorized activities explained why she never seemed disheveled or suspicious when she returned to her regular workstation. Her appearance management was meticulous and calculated, designed to eliminate any evidence of her activities. The storage room where Anna was supposed to be working during these breaks was being used for activities that had nothing to do with inventory management or packaging responsibilities. The space that I knew as a functional work area had been transformed into Anna's private meeting location. The shelving units and equipment that should have been used for legitimate work purposes provided cover for her affair. The surveillance footage revealed that Anna's complaints about me not noticing her efforts to look good took on completely new meaning. She had indeed been making extra efforts with her appearance, spending time on hair and makeup before work, and choosing her clothing carefully. These efforts were being noticed and appreciated, but not by her husband. The attention she complained about not receiving at home was being provided by someone else during work hours. Her frustration with my lack of attention was actually disappointment that I wasn't competing for affection she was receiving elsewhere. The footage showed Anna and her partner exiting the storage room separately with carefully timed departures that suggested a well-established pattern rather than spontaneous passion. They left through different doors and returned to their respective work areas at different times to avoid being seen together.
This coordination indicated that their affair had been planned and executed with careful attention to avoiding detection. The level of organization involved in their meetings demonstrated that this was a sustained relationship rather than a momentary lapse in judgment.
John fast-forwarded through additional footage from different dates, showing that Anna's unauthorized activities occurred regularly over several weeks. The timestamps revealed a pattern of meetings that coincided with periods when I was working late or attending meetings in other parts of the plant. Anna had apparently studied my schedule and used my increased work responsibilities as opportunities for her own activities. The frequency of these encounters explained why she seemed increasingly comfortable with my extended work hours. The most shocking aspect of watching the surveillance footage was realizing that Anna's behavior on camera was completely different from her behavior at home. At work, she displayed confidence and enthusiasm that I rarely saw in our personal interactions. She seemed genuinely happy and engaged in ways that contrasted sharply with her complaints about our marriage. The person on the surveillance monitor appeared to be someone I had never met, despite living with her for 5 years. The devastating reality that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a practiced routine captured by workplace surveillance hit me like a physical blow. The evidence showed multiple encounters over several weeks, each following the same pattern of careful preparation, intimate activity, and meticulous cleanup. Anna had developed a system for conducting her affair that demonstrated planning and commitment that she had never shown toward our marriage. The irony of my security background providing the most damning evidence of my wife's betrayal was almost too much to comprehend. The same cameras I had helped install to protect company property had captured the theft of my marriage. All the surveillance equipment in the world couldn't prevent Anna from betraying our marriage using company time and company facilities. Dawn stopped the footage and looked at me with genuine sympathy. The silence in that security office stretched on for what felt like hours as the weight of what I had witnessed settled in. I sat there staring at the blank monitor screen, trying to process the fact that my marriage had been over for weeks without me knowing it. The evidence was irrefutable, the betrayal was complete, and now I had to figure out what to do with this devastating knowledge. The confrontation when denial meets undeniable evidence. I drove home with my mind racing and my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The surveillance footage had provided irrefutable evidence that Anna was having an affair, but I still held on to some desperate hope that she would at least show remorse when confronted. I had mentally prepared several different approaches for our conversation, imagining she would deny everything initially, then maybe break down in tears and beg for forgiveness. Anna was sitting at the kitchen table reading a magazine when I walked through the front door. She looked up casually and asked how my evening with John had gone, as if this was just another ordinary weeknight conversation. Her relaxed demeanor and normal tone of voice made the situation feel even more surreal. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out how to begin the most difficult conversation of my life. I decided to start with a simple question about her work schedule and whether she'd been spending time in the packaging department storage room. Anna looked at me with mild curiosity, as if she was trying to understand why I was asking about such mundane workplace details. I mentioned that there had been some security concerns in that area, and that surveillance footage was being reviewed. Her expression remained completely neutral, showing no signs of nervousness or defensive behavior that might indicate guilt or awareness of what I was really asking about. When I finally told Anna that I knew about her affair, her reaction was nothing like what I had anticipated. Instead of denial, shock, or emotional breakdown, she simply nodded and said that she figured I would find out eventually. The casual acceptance in her voice was more devastating than any dramatic confession could have been. She admitted to the affair without hesitation, without remorse, and without any attempt to justify or explain her actions. Her matter-of-fact attitude suggested that she had been mentally prepared for this conversation for some time. The anticlimactic nature of Anna's admission left me completely unprepared for how to respond. I had expected to need evidence, arguments, and emotional appeals to get her to acknowledge the truth. Instead, she confirmed everything with complete indifference. Anna's lack of guilt became obvious as our conversation continued. She didn't apologize for betraying our marriage or express regret about the pain her actions would cause. She didn't try to blame me for neglecting her or claim that the affair was a mistake she regretted. Instead, she spoke about the situation as if it was a natural development that had been inevitable given our relationship problems. Her absence of remorse indicated that this betrayal was much deeper than I had imagined, suggesting that she had emotionally checked out of our marriage long before the physical affair began. The comedic timing of my expectations versus reality became painfully obvious during our kitchen table conversation. I had prepared for denials, tears, and dramatic explanations, but Anna's casual acceptance of the situation left me struggling to process what was happening. She seemed almost relieved that the secret was finally out in the open, as if maintaining the deception had been more exhausting than the affair itself. Her reaction suggested that she had been waiting for this moment rather than dreading it, which completely contradicted my assumptions about her feelings toward our marriage. The contrast between my devastation and Anna's apparent relief created an emotional impact that I struggled to understand. While I felt like my entire world was collapsing, she seemed to be experiencing a sense of freedom from having to pretend anymore. The person sitting across from me at our kitchen table was someone I had never met, despite living with her for 5 years. Her calm demeanor and lack of emotional response revealed how little our marriage had meant to her compared to what it had meant to me. Anna's honesty in this moment was probably the most genuine she had been in months, which added another layer of irony to the situation. After months of deception and careful planning to conduct her affair, she was finally telling me the truth about her feelings and intentions. She admitted that she had been unhappy for a long time and that the affair had given her something she wasn't getting at home. Her directness was refreshing and devastating at the same time, because it confirmed that our marriage had been over much longer than I had realized. The realization that Anna's matter-of-fact attitude suggested she had been mentally checked out of the marriage long before the physical betrayal was perhaps the most painful aspect of our conversation. She had apparently made peace with ending our relationship and had already begun planning for a future without me. The affair wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a calculated decision to find happiness elsewhere while maintaining the appearance of our marriage. Her emotional detachment indicated that she had been going through the motions of being my wife while investing her real feelings in someone else. The hardest part of ending our marriage was realizing it was already over before I even knew there was a problem. Anna's lack of remorse and casual acceptance of the situation made it clear that she had been ready to leave for some time. The surveillance footage had simply provided the catalyst for a conversation that was long overdue. Her lack of guilt would actually make the divorce process much simpler than expected, because she wasn't interested in fighting for our relationship or trying to work through our problems. My biggest shock wasn't the cheating itself, but how little Anna seemed to care about getting caught. Her indifference to the consequences of her actions revealed that she had already mentally moved on from our marriage. The woman I thought I knew completely had become a stranger who felt nothing about destroying 5 years of shared life together. What Anna didn't realize was that her casual dismissal of our marriage would soon face judgment from a much larger jury than just me. In a small town where everyone knows small-town justice, when gossip becomes your revenge, small-town gossip networks operate with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the speed of fiber-optic internet, which means Anna's affair became public knowledge faster than any legal system could have processed divorce papers. Within hours of John sharing the surveillance footage with me, the information had somehow leaked through the plant's informal communication channels and spread throughout our entire community. The salt mining facility employs most of the town's residents, so workplace gossip becomes community news almost instantaneously. Anna's reputation went from respected packaging department employee to town scandal before she even realized that her secret was out. The funny reality of how Anna's reputation spread through the community like wildfire proved that workplace affairs in small towns come with built-in consequences that no one bothers to warn you about. The same gossip network that had celebrated our wedding 5 years earlier now dissected every detail of Anna's betrayal with forensic precision. The grocery store checkout lines became forums for discussing her actions, with neighbors who had previously made polite conversation about the weather suddenly having strong opinions about Anna's character and moral fiber. Anna's actions created her own punishment without me having to lift a finger or say a word about what had happened. The natural justice of small-town dynamics operated with remarkable efficiency, delivering consequences that I could never have orchestrated myself. Her affair partner suddenly found himself the subject of uncomfortable conversations with his own family members, who had learned about the situation through the community grapevine. The storage room, where their encounters took place, became the subject of jokes and pointed comments throughout the plant, making both of them acutely aware that their private activities had become public entertainment. The comedic irony that Anna, who had sought attention and excitement, got more attention than she bargained for became obvious within days of the revelation. She had complained about feeling overlooked and underappreciated, but now everyone in town had opinions about her personal life. The beauty salon where she had spent so much time and money gossiping about other people's relationships suddenly became a place where she was the primary topic of conversation. Her efforts to look good and attract attention had indeed succeeded, but the attention came with scrutiny and judgment that she had never anticipated. Anna's inability to handle the social consequences became evident through her changing behavior at work and around town. She started avoiding eye contact with coworkers, eating lunch alone instead of participating in group conversations, and leaving the plant immediately after her shift ended. The confident woman who had conducted her affair with such careful planning suddenly seemed uncomfortable in spaces where she had previously felt at home. Her partner in the affair also struggled with the social pressure, often looking embarrassed during interactions with other employees who clearly knew about their activities. The revelation that Anna's inability to handle the social consequences led to her leaving town entirely provided the perfect closure to this chapter of my life. She gave her notice at the plant within 2 weeks of our confrontation, claiming she had found better opportunities elsewhere. The truth was, she couldn't tolerate living in a community where everyone knew about her betrayal and had formed opinions about her character. Her departure represented the ultimate victory of small-town justice, where social pressure accomplished what legal proceedings might have taken months to achieve. The funny timing of how Anna's search for something better than her marriage led to losing everything she had become the talk of the town for months afterward. She had risked a stable marriage, steady employment, and social standing in pursuit of excitement and attention that ultimately cost her everything she had worked to build. The pursuit of forbidden romance had delivered complications that neither of them had anticipated. Small-town justice operates on its own timeline and methods, which often prove more effective than formal legal procedures. The community's response to Anna's actions created social consequences that were immediate and lasting. Her reputation would follow her long after she left town, because small communities have long memories and extensive networks that connect to other similar communities. The informal justice system delivered punishment that was proportional to the offense and immediate in its impact, requiring no court proceedings or legal fees to implement. My decision to stay and rebuild my life proved to be the better choice compared to Anna's retreat from the consequences of her actions. While she fled from the social pressure and community judgment, I remained to face the situation with dignity and honesty. The same community that had judged Anna's actions ultimately respected my decision to handle the crisis with maturity and grace. My reputation actually improved through the ordeal, as people recognized that I had been the victim of betrayal rather than the cause of marital problems. The community's support for my situation demonstrated that small-town justice includes protection for innocent parties who have been wronged. Neighbors who had previously been casual acquaintances became more friendly and supportive, offering help and expressing sympathy for my situation. The same gossip network that had spread news of Anna's affair also communicated that I had handled the crisis with dignity and deserved respect for my response to difficult circumstances. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices, which proved to be exactly what happened in Anna's case. I never had to speak negatively about her actions or seek retribution for her betrayal. The community's reaction and her own inability to handle the social consequences delivered justice more effectively than any personal vendetta could have accomplished. Her departure from town represented the natural conclusion to a situation where her actions had made her position untenable. What I didn't expect was how Anna's betrayal would actually turn out to be the best thing that could have happened to me, though it would take some time to realize this unexpected silver lining. Life after Anna, the unexpected freedom of starting over. The divorce process felt like quitting a job I didn't realize had been making me miserable for years. Anna moved out within 3 weeks of our kitchen table conversation, taking her belongings and leaving behind an apartment that suddenly felt twice as large and infinitely more peaceful. I woke up each morning without wondering what mood she would be in or whether she was secretly planning activities that didn't include me. The absence of tension I hadn't even recognized was there created a sense of relief that surprised me with its intensity. Rediscovering myself after 5 years of marriage to someone I apparently never knew became an exercise in archaeological self-excavation. My music collection revealed songs I had stopped playing because Anna didn't like them. My wardrobe contained clothes I had stopped wearing because they didn't meet her approval. The refrigerator filled with foods I actually enjoy eating, instead of items chosen to avoid her complaints about my dietary choices. I realized I'd been living as a modified version of myself, adjusted to accommodate someone else's preferences and opinions. The apartment became mine again in ways I hadn't anticipated. I could watch television programs without negotiating channel choices or enduring commentary about my entertainment preferences. The bathroom contained only my personal items, eliminating the daily reminder of someone else's beauty routine and mysterious scheduling requirements. I could work late without feeling guilty about neglecting someone at home because there was nobody at home expecting attention or affection. The freedom to make decisions based solely on my own needs and preferences felt revolutionary after years of considering someone else's secret agenda. Being alone proved infinitely better than being with someone who didn't want to be there. The constant underlying tension that had characterized our marriage disappeared completely, replaced by a peaceful quiet that made me realize how much stress I had been carrying. I no longer had to interpret subtle signals or worry about unspoken complaints that might surface later as relationship problems. The emotional labor of maintaining a marriage with someone who was mentally and emotionally checked out had been exhausting in ways I hadn't recognized while it was happening. The comedic irony that Anna's betrayal had actually freed me from a relationship that was already broken became obvious as weeks passed without her presence. I had been working so hard to save a marriage that had died months earlier, putting effort into reviving something that Anna had already abandoned. Her affair had simply provided the catalyst for ending a situation that was making both of us miserable. The surveillance footage that devastated me initially had actually delivered me from years of additional unhappiness with someone who had no intention of being a genuine partner. Starting over at this stage of life presented challenges I hadn't anticipated, but also opportunities I couldn't have imagined. I had established routines, financial stability, and professional relationships that provided a foundation for rebuilding my personal life. The experience of marriage had taught me valuable lessons about compatibility, communication, and the importance of shared values that would serve me well in future relationships. I knew what I wanted and what I would never tolerate again, which made decision-making much clearer than it had been in my 20s. My security training finally proved useful for protecting my own emotional well-being rather than company property. The observation skills I had developed during night shifts at the plant helped me recognize patterns in people's behavior that might indicate deception or hidden motives. The most important lesson I learned was to trust what people do instead of just listening to what they say. Living alone allowed me to develop routines and habits that reflected my actual preferences rather than compromises designed to avoid conflict. I could maintain the apartment according to my own standards, cook meals I enjoyed, and spend evenings however I chose without considering someone else's expectations. The freedom to be authentically myself without modification or accommodation felt like a luxury I had forgotten existed. I realized how much energy I had been spending on managing someone else's emotional needs and hidden dissatisfactions. The plant's gossip network that had initially embarrassed me about Anna's affair eventually worked in my favor, as the community recognized that I had handled the situation with dignity and grace. Co-workers who had previously been casual acquaintances became more friendly and supportive, offering help and expressing respect for my response to difficult circumstances. The same workplace that had been the scene of my marriage's destruction became the foundation for rebuilding my social connections and professional reputation. The betrayal that had initially felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of a more authentic and satisfying life. I had been freed from a relationship that was draining my energy and preventing me from pursuing genuine happiness. The surveillance footage that revealed Anna's deception had ultimately protected me from wasting additional years with someone who had no intention of being a faithful partner. The unexpected freedom of starting over created possibilities I hadn't considered during my marriage. I could pursue interests that Anna had dismissed, make decisions based on my own preferences, and build relationships with people who valued honesty and genuine connection. The future that had seemed destroyed by a betrayal had actually been liberated by truth, and I was finally ready to discover what that truth might reveal about the world beyond workplace surveillance and small-town secrets. Sometimes, the best security system is the one that protects you from wasting more years on the wrong person. The surveillance cameras designed to catch thieves ended up catching something far more valuable being stolen from my life. And small-town gossip sealed the deal by making Anna's betrayal impossible to ignore or deny. Her affair actually freed me from a marriage that was already over, allowing me to build an authentic life based on honesty rather than deception. The betrayal that felt devastating initially became the catalyst for discovering genuine happiness and freedom I hadn't experienced in years. If you've got your own small-town drama stories or workplace surveillance tales, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear how technology accidentally revealed truths